presentation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about both growing wheat and the sort of community and a project that I did which involved the community for growing wheat. So wheat's a pretty easy thing to grow. Basically, you sow it, which is casting it out into the ground. Grow it, you just let it grow, no cares needed. It's a dry farming technique, so it does not need water. 2 years ago, during the drought, we had 2 inches of rain in San Diego for the year. Grew just fine. In fact, a lot of these pictures are from that year of 2 inches. Harvesting it is just pulling it out of the ground, cutting it, however you can get it out of the ground. Threshing is, you're going to break apart the beard, and I'll show you some slides further on, to get to the grain. And then the winnowing, we'll talk about that, using a winnowing basket, and then, of course, eating it. So this is my backyard during the drought, so that was 2 years ago. And to plant it, you just rake the soil a little bit, broadcast it out. It's best if you do it like right after a rain. So like, today would be good. And then just wait. And I've had success planting it all the way from October through March. And looking at this, I would say plant it, in April as well with the wet season we're having. That's the same view, but about 3 months later. So the great thing about it, it's dry farming, no water. It'll stay green when all the other weeds are dying off. And you don't need to mow it either, is what I tell people. So that's kind of fun. Here's a wheat field at Albert Einstein Academies over kind of downtown area. It's just a small little field, but they had quite a good success with that small.
How many inches of soil do you have in the
Pardon?
How many inches of soil?
So that's a good point. It'll grow in just about anything. And the example to my project at the Jefferson Elementary School, it actually was growing in gravel. So, you can take those and sprout them like a wheat sprout. So you as long as it's wet, it'll sprout, and as long as there's just something to get into the roots, it'll go. So my backyard is all clay. It's like 100% clay. So this is a wheat field in somebody's San Diego backyard. I just think it's really beautiful. It's just a small little 10 by 10 foot area. This is at the Wild Willow Farm, just that light green streak going up the middle. That's about 3 weeks old or so of wheat. You guys here for the wheat? Yeah. Okay, you're in the right place. Small group. I just got started talking about growing wheat, and also a bit about a project I did at Jefferson Elementary that kind of folds into this. Cool. So that's at Wild Willow Farm, about 3 weeks old, and we'll see how it does. This Paul was a 9-year-old. His dad said, no wheat in my backyard, so Paul really wanted to be part of this project, so he grew wheat in these containers. And kind of back to your question, it doesn't work real well in the containers. I think it dries out too quick. You'd have to constantly water it, and also the nutrients, it needs a lot of extra nutrients added to it when it's in this situation. But that said, he did get some wheat out of it. So for my project, I wanted to be able to transport containers of wheat to the street. And we'll talk more about this project as I go. So I cored out straw bales with the chainsaw. And I did about 30 of these. And then in the center there, I filled that with dirt. And then planted the seeds. Doesn't work very well. What happens is the straw sucks all the nitrogen out of the soil. You have to add more nutrients to the soil, and you've got to water it. But that said, it did grow, and I was able to transport it. You guys here for wheat, soil, or Paul's that way?
Thanks.
Go ahead. My name.
Sorry to cut.
No, that's fine. Paul's or wheat? Dry farming. Yeah.
Sorry.
So I had wanted to have a wheat project and to bring the community together to harvest the wheat. And I was looking for some vacant land in North Park. and wasn't having much success, but part of the reason was because I kept calling it a community garden, and there's all these regulations for community garden. So I stopped doing that, and I said it's an art project. All I'm doing is storing straw bales. And sat down with the real estate people at the San Diego City schools in an office, and of course told my project, and the first thing they said, no. So we just talked for a while, and eventually they kind of came around and said, well, yeah, maybe, but you need $2 million of liability insurance. So I'm like, oh great, where am I going to get that? Well, a gallery owner that I was working with at Art Produce Gallery, she accepted the liability insurance requirement, and the project went forward. So with that said, that's the vacant lot next to Jefferson Elementary School. And I placed the straw bales. I used the footprint of the house that used to be there to start placing straw bales. And then in the center of there, I rototilled. It's a little hard to see in that picture, but basically that lot, they had put gravel on top of weeds to try and keep the weeds down, and that's what I was planting in. In like a normal situation, you wouldn't have to rototill, but I felt like I needed to get a little bit of dirt up to the top, so that's why I rototilled. So we planted that in February, and I had a volunteer party. One thing that really helped when I was trying to find land is I got letters of support from Senator Christine Kehoe, Todd Gloria's office, the North Park Main Street Business District, and found out, politicians love to write letters of support. I didn't realize they were so giving, but they'll just, as long as it doesn't cost them a dime and involves community, and the community's for it, they're like, yes, yes, yes. So I was like, cool, get these letters, and that also helped acquire the land. You guys for Paul's?
Yeah,
or me?
sorry.
That's okay. So back to the sowing the seeds, it's really, after we rototill, it's just throwing the seeds out. You can see there in the foreground the gravel, so that's what we planted the wheat in, and it grew successfully. So it really is a very hardy plant. And that's about a week later. And 3 weeks later. The green outside the straw bales are weeds, and inside is wheat.
You said you had to add some nutrients sometimes to it?
Just in the bales themselves, I had to add some nutrients.
Did you ever do pest control at all?
No. I haven't had any pest problem, except I've noticed a few more mice in my backyard when I grow grain. You're looking for wheat or Paul or soil?
Farming, yeah.
Right through. Go ahead, walk through, and then.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
so then, here it is, ready for harvest. And how do you know it's ready to harvest? This is the top of the wheat is called a beard of wheat, and you just break open the plant material, and inside are the wheatberries, which I think are being passed around. So that's the grain, and that's what the flour is going to be made from eventually. So when you've got your wheat growing in your yard, you can just go out there and break it open. Early on, it's just going to be mushy, but eventually it'll be a hard grain like that, and then it's ready to go. And one interesting thing, each seed there will grow a beard of wheat, and then each beard is 50 to 70 more seeds. So I always say, that's the best return on your investment, kind of. So back to the harvest. For the Jefferson project, I enlisted the community to come volunteer, and I had about 100 people show up to the vacant lot to harvest the wheat. We'll hold up the wheat and tied it into sheaves. A sheave of wheat is basically a bundle of wheat, and you can tie it with twine, or you can even use the wheat itself to tie it together into a sheave. I think a nice sheave of wheat size is whatever fits into one hand or two hands. That seems about right. I think that's probably historically how it worked out. You guys dry farming or here? Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank you, David.
That's okay. That's all right, Josh. You keep going.
Oh.
I've had some success storing it like hung upside down in the garage in the rafters for like up to a year. There they've gathered sheaves of wheat at the vacant lot at Jefferson. That's actually my mom with her gathered in bundles sheaves of wheat. 90 years old, going strong. That's all the sheaves of wheat from about a 20 by 30 foot area in my backyard 2 years ago during the drought. So people always ask me, well, how many wheat berries do you get out of that? How much flour? I don't really know, and part of it is because every time I have one of these things, I have a big old party and a gathering and threshing and winnowing event, and of course half of it ends up on the ground, so it's a little hard to tell. But somewhere around 10 pounds of flour for that. It's Captain, guys, I don't know if you know Omar, his son made a little wheat house with the sheaves. So meanwhile, back in Kansas, as part of this project, I decided, well, I really should go to Kansas and see how they do it there. And it's a big deal. The trucks drive up to that little yellow booth. There's a robot arm that goes inside the truck and it sucks out 3 samples of wheat berries from different parts of the truck. It sends the sample along that track to another little office, and in that office they quickly weigh it, measure it for protein content, see if it has any fungus or anything, and then based on that they automatically credit the farmer's account for how much wheat they have, and the quality. Then the concrete building are like, it's grain storage. That's a 1/4 mile long of grain storage, and depending on the protein content, dry farming or wheat?
Dry farm.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Yep. Dry farming or wheat? No, all the way through. Yep.
Through here?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right.
I'll listen to God. I'll listen to wheat.
Cool. So that's a 1/4 mile long of grain storage that gets filled, and they store your grain for up to 10 years. And the reason they store grain for up to 10 years is because we as consumers, Pillsbury wants exactly the same kind of flour makeup every year, every year, every year. So we've kind of lost that touch of what a good grain year is and what a bad grain year is. We don't know, you know. It just goes into those grain storage bins, and we learn about, or you know, we eat it. So my method of transporting wheat on the street was to make these Demeter chariots. Demeter, or Demeter, however you say it, was the Greek goddess of the harvest, and Ceres was the Roman god of grain, or cereal, so Ceres. So I think that's kind of a cool thing to know about when you are eating your grain. Just another bale on the street, and at the farmer's market. And then back to the wheat harvest day. So meanwhile, we're back from Kansas, and we're harvesting wheat on the vacant lot. And then I wanted to transport it to the gallery, and I wanted to move it up University Avenue. So we organized a flash mob dance with the volunteers, and we stopped at 4 places along University Avenue and performed a flash mob dance. Here we are in front of the linkery, or across from the linkery. You can't see it very well on the slide, but everybody's holding a sheaf of wheat, doing their little dance. And I should have brought a video of that, but I didn't. So. And then once you get it to where you want it, it's threshing, which is breaking apart the plant material to release the grain. What I did is I just had got a screen, and you could sort of rub it across, and all the grain would fall through the screen into bags, where you would then put it into a basket and winnow it. So once it doesn't look quite this clean when you run it through the screen, but it's more like that and even worse. So what happens? You've got the grain that you've grown, takes about 6 months. And it's in this basket. I'm going to make a mess. And one great thing about this basket is you can kind of use the side there to break it apart even more. And then what you're doing when you winnow it, I didn't bring another basket, but you're pouring it between the baskets and you're letting the wind blow away the chaff. So all the light plant material will just blow away. So this is a winnowing project on Adams Avenue. Here's a winnowing project in front of the Rite Aid on Adams Avenue. And you know, when you're winnowing on the street, people driving down the street, they're just like, what is going on? But 100 years ago, it would have been a pretty common sight, and you would have known, oh, you know, I'm going to be okay this winter. We have grain to eat. So that's part of what this project for me was just to try and think about that connection of food and how removed we are from it. Once you have the wheatberries, it's time to mill it. This is a real small grain mill here. I'll pass that around. That was like 60 bucks, maybe it was 70 bucks. And I had a larger one that was like 450 bucks. This one works just as well as the big one. The big one I hooked up to a bicycle so it would go a little quicker. And again, it's hard to see in that slide. There's Richard milling flour, or milling the wheatberries into flour. And then, of course, the last thing is eating. If you don't want to grind it into flour, if you lightly toast them in olive oil, add some salt to them and top a little bit, they're really good. They're like a little mini cornmeal. And then, meanwhile, back at the Jefferson lot now, as of 2 weeks ago, which is when this picture was taken, the Jefferson lot there making a playground, which is great, but there's going to be no green. It's all astroturf around the grounds there. So that's the end of my presentation. Any questions or comments?
So what was the quality of the stone ground, or I don't know, you know.
Oh, so you know, I haven't had much success growing or baking bread with my mid-city grown wheat. And I suspect it's something to do with the protein content because I don't have the special office to weigh it and measure it and all that. But it makes a really mean cracker, really good cracker. So just flour, oil, water, and salt. It makes it to a consistency where you kind of get it flat, and the salt, and bake it for between 20 minutes and an hour, depending on how thin you get it.
So the variety of flours comes from the quality of the wheatberry as well as the refining process, then?
It's the content of the wheatberry is
Mostly.
yeah, right. So like for that grain storage in Kansas, they'll mix and match the different bins to get what Pillsbury is demanding, which is what we're demanding. You know, can you imagine if you started talking about, oh, that was a really good year for grain. You know, we don't know what it tastes like anymore, how that works. And I don't think we ever will know again unless you're out growing grain. I got to tell you though, it's really labor intensive. I'm kind of happy for Kansas. You know, I figure this is probably worth a couple $100 in labor. You know, it takes a lot of work to harvest it.
As well as land intensive too.
What's that?
Land intensive.
Land as well, yeah. But it's a good thing to experience, so I encourage you guys to grow wheat.
So sheaves are only created for the hand winnowing process. So
Pardon?
sheaves?
Sheath of wheat?
That's only created for the hand winnowing process.
Exactly, yes,
It's
yeah.
not done anymore.
Not at all, no. What happens is the big combines, and these are huge because I went to Kansas for this harvest. They take them apart to fit them down the road, and they're like from where I am to that wall or even further, and it's just these blades that turn around and they cut the head of the wheat off, and then something happens inside that truck and it spews it out as wheatberries, and then they're left over with all the straw. The straw is a waste product. And in Kansas, some of the farmers were burning the straw and others were just letting it go fallow. So I think that burning is sort of frowned upon, but I think that some of them, the big ag is burning because it's a quicker way turn the soils around and get it going for the next crop.
What did you do? Did you use a mulch or?
Nothing, just literally just rake the soil, cast it out, rake it again, hope it rains, we're good to go. This is winter wheat. I started with organic wheat from Peoples. They have a red winter wheat variety and a Kamut variety. Both those are really good. I tried the spelt and I don't know, it wasn't as pretty as the red winter and the Kamut. So I vote for the red winter or the Kamut and not the spelt.
What do you do with the straw?
The straw you can use for mulch. And eventually I used it. I took all from that project, all the straw went to seeds at City Farm, and they used it for mulch.
Is there any other place in the country that you know of where people are hand harvesting wheat?
You know, there was, it's interesting. Hi, Bonnie. Dry farming or wheat?
Yeah, dry farming.
There. Okay. Dry farming or wheat? Dry farming. We should have switched rooms. What was your? Oh, there was a project in New York City that was actually put on by the big ag grain people, where they took pallets of wheat and they grew wheat on the pallets and then they delivered it to New York City so that people could walk through the wheat fields, which I thought was a pretty cool thing. But it was tied to a lot of advertising and commercialism, so I don't think people really got that connection that they got with this wheat project that I did in North Park. One thing that was kind of nice about it is that it really was a vacant lot, so once I started the project, even though I wasn't supposed to, per the lease agreement, I invited people onto the lot while I was working on there. So families with their kids would walk onto the lot and they'd learn about wheat and they'd watch it growing for the 6 to 7 months that it was there. So it kind of made that vacant lot a space again that was active instead of just a vacant lot with a chain link fence around it.
So you're not continuing the project?
I'm not doing it this year. I'm thinking of making it an every other year project. I started it as sort of a creative endeavor as an artist, and I don't want to be known as Mr. Wheat.
Yeah.
But so I'm doing other things as well. But it is a pretty powerful project, especially with the involvement of the community and sort of that flash mob dance. So I'd like to think of some way to continue it. So if you want to grow wheat, just again, if you go to wheatharvest.org, there's documentation of the project, and my contact is there as well. Anything else, guys? I mean, take some wheatberries home if you want. Plant them as you go up the street. Just kind of